Coffee is up. That makes it Metal Bass Monday. So much like with American politics, it's time to do the Metal Bass State of the Union. No real politics on this channel though, thank God. But, much like the American one, I stand before a house divided. On one side, my fingerstyle brethren. On the other side, my pick-playing brothers. We must come together. We need unification. How else can we fight the scourge of guitar players with crappy tone constantly trying to drown us out when we know we're the superior instrument? Unity, it's the only way to go. But let's talk about the differences. There genuinely are some, but first up, let's put it to bed. It's a dumbass argument. It really is. Do whatever the hell you want. It's different approaches, whatever works for you. I happen to be a fingerstyle player. For me, after a number of years of playing around with different ideas, even though I can play with a pick and I can actually play guitar too, fingerstyle, I always enjoyed the approach of, and I like the sound of it. Most of my heroes were fingerstyle players, and that's where my approach came from. For me, it adds the versatility of being able to move straight from fingerstyle to tapping to slap, which I don't really do, but a number of other different approaches without having to put this other thing somewhere. Plus, I can get basically a pick style sound out of my fingerstyle by the way my bass is set up, the way I attack, where I play, all that kind of thing. So it really has, for me, only upsides. Now on the other side, there are phenomenal pick players. If you don't think so, then Chris Squire, David Ellefson, Bob Daisley, all these guys would probably like to have a word with you, and so would Mick Karn. But it's a style and a sound and an approach, and it can affect your playing and how you come across as a bass player. So it's just which one you wind up liking. One's not better than the other. They all have their approaches. In the differences, though, I can usually pick out a fingerstyle player versus a pick player, not just because of tone, but because of that approach. So it does tend to make you play differently. You approach the instrument differently and the way you hear and feel things. So people who say that there's no difference in the instrument's overall role in the song or how you approach playing depending on whether you go finger or pick, I don't believe in that either. Pick players are able to do some things that you can't really do fingerstyle that are guitar techniques that get pulled in. Palm muting, having an edgier sound when you're hitting chords, things like that, that do kind of affect your playing because those things are options. So again, it's going to be a somewhat different approach. It's not an invalid one, and phenomenal players have used it from time immemorial. Even though there is a difference in approach, every once in a while someone can fool me. And the irony of this being Bob Daisley. I talked about his approach in 4 Players You Should Be Listening To, info card up there. Bob was one of my biggest inspirations, and I'm going to bring him up again in another topic we're going to cover here. But he's, again, one of my biggest inspirations. For the longest time, I had no idea he was a pick player. He's one of the few I ever heard who his tone and his approach to me sound like a fingerstyle player. So, you know, it really comes down to playing what you want to hear, and however you get that across is however you manage to do it. I don't hear a lot of players where I can't pick out what their approach is, but every once in a while someone can fool me, and one of my biggest inspirations managed to, so that says something right there. So, continuing with our State of the Union address, let's talk about where bass is at, I think, in metal, and the good stuff first. I think it's a great time, and we're seeing a real resurgence in the role of bass and its prominence in metal. For a long time, especially through the new metal years, or as I call them, the dark dork ages, for bass, it was basically, bass players were relegated to being an octave pedal for a guitar player. It was something buried in the mix most of the time. If you got a slap line out in a Limp Bizkit song once in a while or something, that was about as much as you could hope for. But now it's stepping forward, especially in things like progressive metal and some more adventurous stuff there, to where we're really seeing a prominence and tones that are starting to cut through again rather than just being supportive. I'm glad to see bass is kind of going into that cycle again. So as far as prominence and there being great bass players and bass players being heard again, we're in a good time. So that's really cool, and I'm really interested to see a couple of new players that I've seen that are starting to use fretless in metal again, and that's really cool. That's a place I want to start going and doing some more work with. I keep trying to get time to do it, but it's not something you can kind of half-ass. You really gotta get into it, make sure your intonation's good and everything, and there's a few guys really doing it well, so that's kind of cool and interesting to see too. So overall, good stuff. The downside. The one problem that I think I'm seeing the most in metal bass, and I'm hoping starts to self-correct, is that it's become guitarish. And what I mean by that is it's being approached a lot more in the guitar's role in the band rather than a kind of contrasting bass line a lot of times. When I listen to a lot of, even though they're phenomenal players, some of the newer guys coming out, it sounds to me like they're playing a guitar part just on a lower pitched instrument. That always bothered me when 8-string players or something like that would go, well, I got low notes, so I don't need a bass player. And the idiotic part of that statement is just playing low notes isn't a bass line. A bass line is a specific contribution to a song, not a tonal range. So when I hear some of these players, and some of them have phenomenal chops and great sound and everything, it's kind of disappointing to me that a lot of times I'll hear their tapping runs or things and I go, this could very easily be the guitar part to this song. And it sounds to me like their influences and what they're borrowing from the most are guitar players. The reason I'm bringing up Bob Daisley again is I feel like players like him are a bit of a lost art right now, where the bass is utterly independent of the guitar part, where there's a completely different melodic and rhythmic contribution being made, and that following the riff isn't some kind of ironclad rule, being an octave pedal for a guitar player, or approaching the instrument from a very guitar-centric point of view. Bass can do amazing things and basically dominate a song with incredible ideas, and it's liberating for a guitar player. I find a lot of times to be able to have that freedom of having bass create something that allows them to run off and not have to hold down the entire rhythm section. I've been in a few jam sessions where I've kind of tried to play that role and lean more to the drums and tried to create a counter statement. And every single time when I feel like I've nailed it, the guitar player is just out of his mind about it and going, that was so cool, I didn't have to hold things down so I could be more sporadic or not have to play the riff the exact same way every time. It was really more interesting and gave the song a more improvisational feel and gave the guitar player more freedom to run in a completely different tonal range and contribute contrasting ideas. I think that's a bit of a lost art. There are some guys doing it, but not to the point where it used to be. And I'm hoping that makes a comeback. That's definitely something I'm going to be encouraging through some composition lessons and technique things. And I'm hoping we can kind of pull that back into the modern because, again, we've got these guys with phenomenal chops who can do just about anything you might ever want to hear. If we can lean it back into that thing of bass being a complete area and musical statement unto itself, that's when it's on. I think that's when we're really going to reach a new plateau in phenomenal metal bass playing. So let's see if we can self-correct on that one. The secondary downside I think I'm seeing is much like with guitar too, but I think it's production overall, is copycat tone. People not looking to find their own sound, and as soon as a hot new tone comes out, everybody in every forum I see all over the web just, what's your preset? What's your preset? What's the, what pickups you using? What amp are you using? Then they want to try and dial in that person's sound exactly. And I get it, for young players, you want to emulate your heroes, and that's where you start discovering your own voice and everything. Unfortunately, I'm not seeing people move past that stage, though. 8 or 9 years on, I'm seeing the same guys going, what's the new preset? What's the new this? You be the preset. You have to start listening to your own inner voice and coming up with your own contribution. You should be the one handing out the preset, or not. Keep them in the dark, make them find their own sound. It just homogenizes it, and metal to me has always been the place where there were no rules and you could experiment and do whatever you wanted. And now it seems like it suddenly has a lot of rules. And there's specific tones that come in, and now it's this sound. I mean, how long did we go on with guitar players that every one of them had to have the same amp? It's even now. It used to be the 5150, which is a great amp. I have one, love it. But when everybody has one and uses it the exact same way and mics it the same way with the same speaker at the same angle, and now an EVH, 5153, everybody has one, and everybody's starting to sound the same again. The same problems with bass. Everybody's after this very specific upper mid honk, and they're all trying to dial it in, and they're all using the same gear. And I think it really hurts us in the end because it makes us predictable and bland. And if your sound is bland, you're going to be bland. And if you build your sound to sound just like someone else's, odds are you're going to wind up playing like them too, because you want that sound and that approach. And that's just boring. So I really think we got to break that trend too, of always chasing after whatever the hot thing is at the minute. It's time to be the hot thing, not follow it. So get out there, twist some dials, do things in ways they weren't supposed to do, stack your pedals, do what you got to do. But forge ahead, do something new, break the cycle of boring ass same bass tones. What am I seeing to close everything up that I think is really hopeful and really cool? In the last Monday episode, I talked about how we just had so much gear and everything was easily available. I think we are cresting at that point where a lot of this is going to come forward. I touched on it in the last episode, but again, it's become so easy to have such great sounds that the pursuit isn't there. It isn't taking up time. So now people are starting to have to go, well, what can I contribute? How can I stand out? And that standing out is going to have to come from your originality, your art, your signature tone, your signature playing style, and really writing things that are interesting, not just technically brilliant. I love weird, fast stuff, all of it. But a lot of times it just does come down to, I'm going to play the same thing everybody else is, just faster. That I'm starting to see die off again. That we're getting to that equilibrium where chops and talent and sound are all having to meet together. So I think that's a really great thing, and I'm really optimistic about it right now. I think metal bass is really at that point where we're going to start seeing another level of masters coming out. And that can take a ton of different forms, from just great, non-technical, but solidly creative bassists to virtuoso players really trying out some new ideas. I see it starting to happen all over, and I think we owe a bit of it to all that tone search being knocked out. Creativity is the thing that has to come to the forefront now. And I'm starting to see a lot of it around. It's a really cool thing. So I think we have nothing to look forward to but really, really cool metal bass lines coming up. So get out there, experiment. And if you have something, or you think you've done something really interesting or an approach, always put it in the comments section. Always link things up. I'd love to see you guys share stuff, toss ideas back and forth, because I get inspired by just hunting around on YouTube and seeing every great once in a while somebody that just knocks me back with something I would never have thought of doing. I'm hoping that's some of you guys and girls. So if that's you, hit me up. Do something below. And if it's really cool and I can show you on my channel or something, I'm more than happy to. Last up, I'm going to be launching a teaching platform soon. I'm working in a couple different avenues. I'm going to be releasing my book in a second form, a book called Skeleton Key System, about mastering the fingerboard and learning music theory and everything you would basically need to know as far as chord shapes, all of that contained within one single system. But that's going to be an upcoming thing, so while I'm developing that, I'm going to be doing some more techniques, some more lessons, some more things like that. I've got a couple ideas put down, but if you have some ideas or requests or things that you think could be fit into a 10 to 20 minute kind of short video lesson thing, absolutely leave it in the comments. A lot of the times the lesson ideas that I put out come from the questions I get in the comments. So let me know what's on your mind and what you feel would be the biggest benefits. I've got some stuff coming up about transitioning from 4 to 5 string bass, a little bit more tapping stuff, a lot coming out as far as composition, style development, how to develop your own voice, how to become a better songwriter and bassist, because we're bass players, but we're musicians first. You should always be thinking about the song first. No matter how much technical ability you have, it's got to make a good song. So how to make those things all come together, how to use your chops to create bass lines instead of having a bass line that just stops and then you show off for a minute and then you start the bass line again. A really good bass line should be your solo. So those will be a few things I've got coming up that are planned, and a bunch of new gear reviews and things too. But especially on the lesson material, let me know what you would like to see, and I'll always do my best to address it. It's been really cool and really fun, and really coming out with a lot more content this year. So I'm psyched to share it with you guys and to see how this new lesson platform and things I'm working on works for you too. So as always, the feedback is appreciated, and the state of the union for metal bass is strong. So with that, I will see you next week. Like, subscribe, share, get more ideas, get more conversations going, put them down below, and I will see you on the next one.